And it wasn't long, but in a year we had a boy, your father.
Well, you, after the first time you met him, you married him in 4 months from then?
Mm-hmm. On Mother's Day in May. This was probably in the early part of the year, or the latter part of the year.
So you moved to New York, and within a year you're married?
Practically, right.
So how come things moved so quickly?
Because he was absolutely insistent on getting married, and I had changed my mind before we got married. I met him every noontime. He came in from New Jersey to see me, and I said, I want to tell you something. I've changed my mind. And he was flabbergasted. I said, it's running too fast. It's going too fast. And I really don't want to get married. I want to try out my expertise on being a nurse. And he felt so terribly bad that I thought, my goodness, he must really care about me. And he told his family the invitations were out to get married, and he said I couldn't do this to him. So I figured it was probably not the right thing to do, so I agreed to marry him. And
it was not the right thing to do, to call it off after everything had been set in motion.
So we were married in the church, in the rectory of the church, because I was a Protestant, he was Catholic, and Mrs. O'Brien asked me if I'd like to turn Catholic, and I said I didn't think I could embrace the religion, but I would be glad to marry him. She said, well, you know the children will have to be Catholic. I said, yes, I realize that. But we never had any trouble over being different religions. I used to go to Mass with the family, and everything went.
What church were you married in? Do you remember?
It's Saint. I never can think of the name of that church, which makes me upset sometimes. It was one of the nicest churches in Yonkers, New York, is where he lived. He lived on Park Hill, and you couldn't get married in the church if you were a Protestant. So we were married in the rectory, and we had a lovely reception at his home. And my mother came and my brother came. My father couldn't make it from Massachusetts because he was... Is she awake?
Well, let's take a break here for a second. Tell me about Mr. and Mrs. O'Brien.
Oh, yes.
Some of their background. Mr. O'Brien was Irish. His parents were Irish.
Oh, yes. He wasn't from Ireland. He was second generation from Ireland. He was born here, and so were his parents. It was his parents' parents that were from Ireland. I used to know exactly where they were from. It might come to me as I'm talking. But I immediately thought that they were wonderful people. The girls were so nice. And
so his wife was English?
She was from English background. Her name was Marston, Marston, I think, her maiden name. And they were... she was Protestant, I'm sure. It tells there. Maybe I could read some of it.
Sure.
Oh yeah, here it is. They were against the marriage because they wanted him to marry a Catholic girl, I think.
Against?
A strong-willed, oh no. Here it says, a strong-willed, good Catholic girl married an equally strong Catholic boy in spite of parental disapproval. The marriage, not sanctioned in their church, was performed by a minister of another faith. Nonetheless, by the time their union had survived 50 years, They had suffered through 3 or 4 miscarriages, raised 9 children, and subsequently had some 45 grandchildren. And those in the know said it wouldn't last. The union of a butcher's daughter and an architectural engineer had spawned over 350 descendants at last count, and some 5 years ago. This was written, I don't see what year this was.
1992.
Oh. Does that tell?
Right here.
1990?
2.
Oh, they were married before that.
No, I mean this was written.
Oh, this was written in 1992. Memories of great-grandmother O'Brien may have wanted her beloved Joseph to marry someone more worthy in her mind. We only hope that she lived long enough to eat those words. Her sweet daughter-in-law, Carolyn, certainly did her best to put the O'Brien name in every state of the Union. Now this is her. Carolyn was her name. She's Carolyn O'Brien. And her mother didn't think that he was good enough for her. Isn't that what that means?
No, it's saying that Joseph's mother.
Yeah. Of course, we never met her. She was long by that time.
Right. So.
But he was well educated as he became an industrial engineer. And he was very smart. He was the kind that could learn anything.
So Henry's was brought up in Boston area, and then he moved to the New York area.
Joseph Henry, yeah. It seemed that Joseph, in his abiding love for his wife, wanted to have their reunion blessed by the Catholic Church. This thought probably came about 20 to 25 years into the marriage. Such a nice gesture was quickly deemed unnecessary by one and of their many friends in the clergy, probably a Monsignor. See, even the Monsignor thought, after all this, why should they have to have her become Catholic, I think.
Well, they had gotten married outside of the Catholic Church.
Yes, they had. This isn't going to sound too good. 2 people who had survived the trauma that raising a large family can bring are already truly blessed. Isn't it nice to know that even in those Victorian times, true love really did conquer all? She was truly, she was a marvel.
Where was she from?
I don't know any of her background. There's only one daughter living now that I know of that could give us any insight into that, and that's Grace. She's alive, and her son, Jerry, lives near her, and she's the one who lived with her mother when her husband wasn't making any money, and he was also he had a situation with alcohol. But he finally drove Mr. O'Brien, or they had a chauffeur, and they let him go, and they hired Towie, that's his name, Charles Towie, to drive the Cadillac. He had to work somehow, so Mr. O'Brien let him drive him to work. He had a big Cadillac, and he was the chauffeur. He could be trusted for that, but not to make a good living for himself. So they more or less supported Charles and Grace.
Did they live in the house with them then?
Yes, she lived there. They had 3 floors to that house. First floor.
And where was the house again? It was in Park
Hill.
Park Hill.
21 Rockland Avenue, or Rockland Road. Rockland Avenue, I think.
So, Joseph Henry's parents were from Boston, And then he moved down to the New York area?
He must have,
Or his business might have brought him down?
yes, he left Boston and, well, they traveled a lot, you know. That's where Fred got the idea. He liked to be in
Construction.
construction, but he never finished the engineering course. So
That's
he,
what- So he went to school for engineering?
he went to several different colleges, and when they didn't hear from the colleges as to his marks, they would find him working in a factory somewhere, and going about in a haphazard way, I guess. Not doing anything bad, but just being free and easy because he was really spoiled. He didn't take any responsibility for anything. And I met him at that party, you know,
Right.
and he was well behaved, very, very well dressed, and beautiful manners, but he had no way of making a good living. But he always worked at something and made enough money to keep us going. And we moved a lot, 10 times in 8 years.
So what was his job when you got married?
Timekeeper, I guess. He was working for a construction man in New Jersey, and I was living in New York.
Did he have a plan to do?
He had
Something?
just a plan to get married. That's what he wanted to do, get married and have children. And I was very green. My father warned me. He said, this man is not dry behind the ears yet. And he said, you're marrying a man who hasn't got any seeable future. And you're a trained nurse, and you should be marrying a man of some stature, and not this boy who was a year younger. And when a man is a year younger, he's much younger than that in his behavior and so forth, you know. He runs mature. But I was in love with him. That's the silly part. You think you're in love lots of times when it's just that you just admire them so much.
What did you admire so much about him?
Oh, he was so neat and so handsome and such a good dancer. And he was, so attentive. Always had flowers, always had everything. Even if we had no money to pay the milk, I would get a bouquet of flowers every week. This is sheer irresponsibility.